The war had stretched across the stars for years, a brutal conflict between the human race and the Zorvok Dominion. Commander Threx had never questioned his duty until now. He stood in the dim glow of the containment chamber, his scaled fingers curled into a fist as he surveyed the captured humans behind the reinforced energy barrier. They were weak, malnourished, and unarmed. But what unsettled him most was their size. The prisoners cowered, pressed against the cold metal walls, their wide eyes filled with fear. At first, he had assumed it was simple cowardice. Humans were fragile creatures, after all. But as he studied them further, unease crept into his thoughts. They were small, too small, their limbs thin, their bodies underdeveloped. They were not warriors. Commander, the prisoners had been secured. Officer Jarlik, his second-in-command, stepped forward. His orange eyes gleamed with suspicion as he gestured toward the captives. They resisted, but their ship was poorly defended. It was an easy raid. Threx exhaled slowly, forcing himself to speak with the usual detachment expected of a Zorvok leader. "Tell me, officer, do these humans appear strange to you?" Jarlik frowned, his ridged brow furrowing. "They are weak, small, likely from an underfed colony. Humans are unpredictable, but this lot will not last long." Threx turned his gaze back to the prisoners. The tallest among them, a girl with tangled brown hair, was whispering urgently to the others, her voice calm despite the terror in her eyes. Another human, an adult male, likely a soldier, placed a protective arm around the group. Threx activated the containment chamber's translator. "Identify yourselves." The man straightened, his expression hardening. "Lieutenant Carter, United Earth Fleet." He nodded toward the children. "These are civilians. You need to let them go." Civilians? Threx narrowed his eyes. Zorvok warriors fought with honor, but humans had proven time and time again to be deceptive. He had seen their kind use ambush tactics, lay false traps, manipulate and lie. Could this be another ploy? "Why were you transporting them through a war zone?" Threx asked, his voice clipped. "It wasn't a war zone," Carter shot back. "Your people attacked a civilian transport." Jarlik scoffed. "A likely story. The Dominion has long suspected that humans train warriors from a young age. Are these not child soldiers?" A murmur of distress rippled through the prisoners. The girl, Threx guessed she was barely past her first decade, stepped forward, shaking her head. "We're not soldiers." Her voice wavered, but she held her ground. "We were running. We were trying to escape the war." Threx studied her. She was terrified but defiant. A warrior spirit, but not a warrior. "How old are you?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. 9. A weight settled in Threx's chest. 9 cycles. Among the Zorvok, a child of 9 was still under the care of their brood clan, not yet trained for combat. Among the humans, it seemed, they were left to fend to themselves in the middle of a war they could not possibly understand. Threx turned away, pacing. A gnawing discomfort twisted inside him. The Dominion had fought this war under belief that humanity was a threat, dangerous, expansionist, unwilling to negotiate peace. But now, faced with these trembling children, he felt a sickening doubt take root. Jarlik watched him carefully. "What are your orders, Commander?" Threx did not answer immediately. His thoughts churned, each one heavier than the last. The Zorvok code was clear. Warriors did not harm the defenseless. Capturing enemy combatants was one thing, but this was something else. "Commander?" Jarlik pressed. Threx's voice was quiet but firm. "Have the medical unit examine them. I want confirmation of their biological development." Jarlik's mouth tightened. "You doubt what is in front of you?" "I will not make decisions based on assumptions," Threx said coldly. "Carry out my orders." Jarlik hesitated before giving a curt nod. "As you command." As his officer left, Threx turned back to the prisoners. The girl, Emma, was still staring at him, her young face marked with defiance and fear. Carter remained by her side, his jaw tight. Threx deactivated the translator. For the first time in his career, he was uncertain of what came next. The medical report confirmed what Threx already knew, but hadn't wanted to accept. The humans were, without a doubt, Children, young, vulnerable, and entirely incapable of posing any real threat. The knowledge burned in his chest like acid. His people had told him that humanity was ruthless, that they would do anything to gain the upper hand in this war. But what kind of species sent its young to fight? He stood in the command chamber of his warship, staring at the glowing reports on the console in front of him. His officers waited in silence, the tension in the room thick. Jarlek stood at his side, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "This is a mistake," Jarlek said at last. "They are human. You hesitate out of sentimentality." Threx exhaled sharply. "They are children." Jarlek's expression didn't change. "And what do you intend to do with them? Return them? The High Council will not approve. They will see it as weakness." A flicker of irritation surged through Threx, but he suppressed it. "The High Council has not seen what I have seen. They do not stand before these creatures and feel the weight of what has been done. I will send a report. They will understand." Jarlek gave a bitter laugh. "You think the High Council cares? They sanctioned this war. They gave the order to attack that transport. If you think they will let this inconvenience alter their course, then you are a fool." Threx turned to face him fully. "And what would you have me do, Jarlek? Keep them in chains? Sell them back to their people as bargaining tools?" Jarlek didn't flinch. "Yes, that is exactly what we should do." Disgust twisted in Threx's gut. He had fought countless battles for the Dominion, obeyed orders without question, executed strategy with precision, but never, not once, had he been ordered to take children as prisoners. The war had always been about survival, about power, about control. This was different. This was something he would not allow. A sharp chime from the console interrupted them. A transmission was coming through, an encrypted message from the High Council. Threx clenched his jaw as he accepted the communication. The holographic projection of High Chancellor Vozek flickered into view. His reptilian features were as severe as ever, his golden eyes devoid of warmth. "Commander Threx," Vozek intoned, his voice a slow, deliberate rasp. "Your report has been received." Threx straightened. "Chancellor, the prisoners we captured." "Yes, we are aware." Vozek waved a clawed hand dismissively. "A regrettable oversight. Nevertheless, they remain a strategic asset. You are to hold them. Their return will be conditional upon humanity's surrender." The words were like a blow. Threx stiffened. "They are children, Chancellor." Vozek tilted his head, and a cold silence settled between them. Threx forced himself to keep his voice level. "This is not the way of the Dominion. We do not take the defenseless as hostages. We do not use children as leverage." Vozek's gaze hardened. "The way of the Dominion is survival. The humans do not share your noble ideals, Commander. They would do the same to us if given the chance." "Would they?" Threx asked, his voice quieter now, but no less firm. "Because what I see before me is not a race of monsters, but a group of terrified younglings who are fleeing, not fighting. If we do this, we become something far worse than what we accuse them of being." Vozek's expression didn't change. "Your orders are clear. Do not mistake sentiment for strategy. Threx, if you fail to comply, you will be recalled, and your command will be stripped from you. The Dominion has no use for weakness." The transmission cut out. The room was silent. Jarlek exhaled sharply through his nostrils. "There is your answer. The High Council has decided." Threx turned away from him, his mind racing. This was not a simple military decision. It was a choice that would define him, that would carve a permanent line in the sand between who he had been and who he would become. He left the chamber without another word. The containment room was as he had left it. Cold, dimly lit, the prisoners huddled together like frightened animals. Lieutenant Carter looked up as he entered, his expression unreadable. The girl, Emma, sat near his side, her thin arms wrapped around one of the younger children. Threx stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "You are leaving." Carter's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I will not keep you here." The human didn't move immediately, as if waiting for the trick, for the deception. But when Threx stepped to the side, revealing the panel that would deactivate the containment field, understanding dawned in his face. "You'll be branded a traitor for this. Carter said. Threx keyed in the release code. The energy barrier flickered, then disappeared. Then, so be it. The humans hesitated for only a moment before Carter moved, ushering the children forward. Emma hesitated as she passed Threx, her small face tilting up to meet his gaze. "Thank you." He didn't answer. The ship's alarms blared before they reached the hangar. Threx's heart clenched. Jarlac had acted faster than he anticipated. The betrayal was swift and violent. Armed officers met them in the corridor, weapons raised. Jarlac stood at the front, his face a mask of cold disappointment. "I knew you would do this, Commander." Threx stepped in front of the humans. "Stand down, Jarlac." Jarlac's grip tightened on his weapon. "I cannot. You have chosen a path that leads only to exile or death. I would rather it be the latter." The fight was brief, brutal. Threx moved with the precision of a warrior who had fought 100 battles. His soldiers, those still loyal, rallying behind him. Blaster fire echoed through the halls. When the dust settled, Jarlac lay on the ground, alive but defeated. Threx turned to Carter. "Go. Now!" Carter didn't waste time. The humans fled toward the hangar, and Threx watched as the stolen shuttle launched into the void. He knew there would be no returning from this. The Dominion would hunt him. The High Council would brand him a traitor. But for the first time in his life, Threx felt certain he had done the right thing. The warship drifted in silence, the weight of what had transpired settling over Threx like a suffocating shroud. The children were gone, their stolen shuttle vanishing into the void, but the echoes of their presence lingered. He had watched them leave, watched as they escaped into the stars, carrying with them the undeniable proof of his defiance. There was no undoing what he had done. He had cast the die. The bridge was tense. His remaining officers stood rigid, waiting for him to speak, waiting to see what their commander, now a traitor in the eyes of the Dominion, would do next. The communication console flickered with an incoming transmission. The High Council would demand an explanation. There was nothing he could say that would change what had already been set in motion. Jarlac had been confined to the lower decks, his wounds treated but his authority stripped. His defeat had been necessary, but it had not been easy. The betrayal had cut deep, not only because Jarlac had been his second in command, but because a part of Threx had once thought the same way, that the war demanded absolute obedience, that survival justified anything. That mercy was weakness. He pressed the console, accepting the transmission. High Chancellor Vozic's face materialized in a flickering hologram, his golden eyes cold with barely restrained fury. "Commander Threx," Vozic said, his voice like a blade against stone, "the humans have escaped your custody." Threx did not look away. "Yes." Vozic's reptilian features hardened. "You defy the Dominion. You reject your duty. You allow the enemy to flee." His voice darkened, a dangerous growl forming beneath his words. "Explain yourself." "There is no explanation that would satisfy you, Chancellor," Threx said. "I will not justify what should never have been done in the first place." Vozic's silence was more dangerous than his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than before. "You have broken faith with your people. You have disgraced the Zorvok name." Threx exhaled, his jaw tightening. "No," he said evenly, "I have reclaimed its honor." For the first time, something like disappointment flickered in Vozic's eyes. "You were one of our finest warriors, Threx, but you are lost to us now. The Dominion does not suffer traitors." The transmission cut out. There was nothing more to say. The decision had been made. A long silence stretched across the bridge. The crew waited uncertain, some still loyal, some unsure, some already questioning whether they had placed their faith in the right leader. Threx turned to them, his voice steady. "Those of you who wish to leave may do so. I will not order you to follow me into exile." No one spoke at first. Then, one by one, they made their choices. Some left, taking escape pods that would return them to the Dominion. Others remained, their faces solemn but resolute. Threx did not watch the pods drift away. His focus remained on the stars ahead. The Dominion had cast him out. He was no longer their commander, no longer bound to a war he no longer believed in. He was something else now, something undefined, but not lost. He returned to his quarters, exhaustion creeping into his bones. The battle had ended, but another path lay ahead, uncertain and uncharted. His gaze fell upon the small object resting on his desk, a toy left behind by the human girl Emma. A simple thing, insignificant in the grand scale of war, yet carried more weight than any victory he had ever won. As he picked it up, he wondered if the humans would remember his name. If, in some distant future, their paths would cross again. If, perhaps, he had done more than just save a handful of children. Perhaps he had changed the course of the war itself.